Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to My World. And of course, we couldn't do it without the Hall of Famer, the greatest professional wrestler of all time, your friend and mine, Double J, Jeff Jarrett. Jeff, how are you, man?
Oh, nice and worked out and tanned up and ready to head to New York City. Arthur Ashe. It's that time of year. Conrad doing good. What a football weekend. Had a blast night doing our YouTube special. I'll let you get into all the ins and the outs of that. As you know, we hit all kinds of stuff last night. Capital City Clash, Big Ben Bishop. I just can't wait for our pal Dave Silva to start sending in his promo skills. So anyhow, Conrad, doing fine, pal. You all good today down there at the beach?
I'm good to go. Excited to be with you here today. Of course, my studio computer has, it's met its final demise. So I'm on a new laptop, and that's the reason I look and sound a little different today. It was a 6 a.m. Walmart run this morning, but hey,
Wow.
My World continues. Last night, Jeff and I were live at myworldpod.com. That's your home for all things Double J. If you haven't already, go hit the subscribe button and turn on the notifications bell. We previewed exactly what's going on with Grand Slam. We talked a little bit about the Vince McMahon documentary, including Vince's new statement that he's released. All that and more, including an entire recap of the Capital City Clash and so much more at myworldpod.com. But one of the things that Jeff and I stumbled across is an independent wrestler joined us live last night at myworldpod.com and said, hey, I would love to get Jeff's feedback on my promo. It would mean the world to me if he would just take a look. I asked Jeff, how often do you hear that? And he said all the time. But in reality, it's hard to do that for everyone. And maybe it's not the best, most efficient way to do it. So what we suggested live last night on myworldpod.com is moving forward, independent wrestlers who are trying to advance their career and move up the ladder, so to speak, and chase their wrestling dreams, you can send a promo or a full match or both to My World on social media. That's Instagram or Twitter. And we will go ahead and pull those, and we're going to be reviewing those and getting Jeff's real deal feedback as we watch those. So join us at myworldpod.com. You want to talk about the learning tree? I don't want to get in trouble with our gimmick attorney, but let's go sit under Jeff's learning tree a little bit with Double J at myworldpod.com. I can't wait to see what's happening tomorrow night at Arthur Ashe. I know you're going to be in a big-time match with Hangman Adam Page. It's a Lumberjack strap match. We heard all from Jeff about that on our YouTube at myworldpod.com. Encourage everybody to check that out. But our topic today
Conrad,
is
before
talking.
we get into that, you know what? Just I didn't bring it up last night, but I think there was a couple of comments that were thrown out, but I've seen some online. And actually, I get my workouts, and the last couple of days, that promo aired Saturday night in Collision. The two things that I guess you could say kind of water cooler talk, Conrad, at the gym. Well, the first one is the Netflix documentary. Boy, oh boy, is there is a lightning rod of two gentlemen this morning. Conrad, you would have enjoyed it. You probably would have welcomed getting a mic and doing a point counterpoint, because they got in a bit of an argument on I don't say who's right and who's wrong, but just anyway, I don't want to get all into that, but man, it is a lightning rod of emotion about it coming out. And one guy was pro Vince, one guy was anti Vince. Interesting conversation. Then the other thing was, and I'm going to ask you before I get into the comments, what do you believe a lumberjack strap match is?
Well, I think there's going to be a whole bunch of folks on the outside of the ring ready to throw you guys back in. But a strap match to me means you guys are hooked up with the wrist, and you're going to wear each other out. I think the reason people are confusing it is in Memphis and certainly in the South, we've seen, I think, what used to be known as a country boy whipping match or something like that. And that's where fans might be on the outside of the ring or other wrestlers. But I've seen it where fans would like have their belt and they'd have to hold the buckle. And then they would whip guys if they went to the outside. But I don't think that's the way this is. But maybe you could correct.
You're right. That's I'm kind of amazed that a strap match is a strap match that you just alluded to. A strap match with lumberjacks. A lumberjack strap match is exactly, and that's why it's almost a little bit of a head scratcher that I believe I said it in the promo. There's going to be 8 guys outside the ring, and I gave a couple of suggestions. They're all going to have straps in their hand. And I said, all I have to do is I don't have to pin you 1, 2, 3. I just got to beat your ass and get you outside. And then they could light your ass up with straps. Ironically, we are on an anniversary. I think it's, 16, 17, 18 years of the Fans Revenge strap match that I had with Samoa Joe and TNA at the Impact Zone. And we had anybody from fans to Universal Studio workers to Spike executives that were as lumberjacks that had their straps in their hand, but we called that a Fans Revenge match. But anyway, at Arthur Ashe Stadium, Connie, it's me and Hanger one-on-one and 8 lumberjacks outside the ring with straps. That's how it's going down. So not only do I get the opportunity to deliver a few receipts, so do several other
folks
from the AEW roster. Yeah, so I'm glad we cleared that up. But it's a bit of a kind of disappointing on my part. Maybe I didn't do the best of job of explaining it, but maybe we'll see. Anyhow, Conrad, here on My World, the My World listeners know exactly what they're going to see tomorrow night. Then.
I got to tell you, Jeff, I'm disappointed. Like, why didn't you ask me to be one of your guys beating the shit out of Hangman Adam Page? I'd have loved to have.
Do you see
taken
over your
a strap,
like way over your right shoulder? It's called It's called sand.
Yes.
And there's ocean, and there's a tide that comes in and tide comes out. I don't think the gravitational pull could have got your butt from the Gulf of Mexico to LaGuardia.
There's a hurricane coming here, bud.
No way.
Yeah. So, like, I'm looking for a reason to leave and getting a nonstop from Pensacola to LaGuardia.
I didn't know that.
No, I mean, could you put in a word with Tony? Can I whip Hangman Adam Page?
Damn right. You bring old Waffle Stomping Silva.
No, he can't come. He don't need to be there. No,
okay, just you. What about Castillo?
No, he's busy. He's got to do radio.
I'd whip his ass anyway. Next time I see him, oh boy, he's still running. I think he's already to Milwaukee by now.
He's Forrest Gump. He's growing a beard and running cross country. Hey, we appreciate you guys hanging out with us, and I hope that you'll make plans to join Jeff if you are in the Northeast. AEWTIX.com is where you can see Jeff whip Hangman Adam Page's ass. That's what's going to happen. Little spoiler. That's what's going to happen. I, for one, am pumped up about it. I got my buddy Bart coming to hang out, and we're going to be watching this. It's going to be a blast. Nice. I also wanted to talk about our topic today because it's an interesting time in professional wrestling, certainly in your life. We're going to go back just over 20 years ago to 2004, and there's a lot of moving parts in WWE and certainly in TNA. But as we talk about what's going on with TNA, I want to mention the Russo, because it feels like in this era, he was always in the news. But there was actually a discussion, as the story goes, that Russo was going to enter seminary school and be done with the company. He's going to leave wrestling and join seminary school. And I know he had a book that he put out around this same time. But I think this caught a lot of people off guard. Were you surprised? And what can you tell us about this decision that Russo made? Or, I mean, I don't know how far he actually got with that, but what a story this was. The guy who booked so much Crash TV, so much attitude, so much pushing the boundaries, leaving for seminary school.
So, and I always, from about 2003 or 4 till about 2000, right up to kind of this, where we're kind of planting the flag here. For lack of a better word, we'll get to the title of it somehow, some way. But we're going to kind of land the plane, if you will, on the final show done from the asylum. That's correct, right, Connie? That's kind of where we're headed. And so I don't like to ever, I'll say even discuss a man's walk, his faith walk, because you never know what goes on in somebody's head or what they're going through, but between that space between their ears or what their family's going through. There's so many things, but off and on through the years, me and Vince have had different conversations. But as far as him specifically saying, I'm going to seminary school, I never heard those words. I knew that he wanted to get out of Atlanta for quite some time. He was raising his 3 kids there. And bless her heart, his wife is stuck with him. No, they've been together for a long time, and she was going to support him. And they made the decision, or he made the decision, and the family followed and supported it, that he was going to Denver. As far as like you're asking, I never heard him say that. I know that his faith was in my recollection. That's why it gets a little fuzzy on the different times, because like you said, Vince was in the news, and I'm talking about TNA news. He was in the news, out of the news. He was a talent. He was creative. The situation with Hogan, the situation with my father, the situation even with me and Dixie and Dutch and everything. It was always, is he talent? Is he just going to pitch ideas? Is he a part of creative? And it really, that happened from day one until 2013. It was a ebb and flow type situation. But I hope that answers your question. It was never told to me that he was, he never told me I'm going to seminary. I knew that he wanted to go to Denver. He fell in love with the city. He's still there to this day. Born and raised on Long Island, moved to Atlanta for WCW. He really never had any roots there other than the WCW job. We all know how that went. It came and went. It came and went. Up, down, up, down, up, down. We started TNA, and now we're talking about a 2003, 2004 timeframe. He had been there 4 years, 5 years, and I knew before even the seminary discussion came up, he was ready to get out.
I think that's a story that a lot of people who follow wrestling are familiar with. There gets to be a point where guys just get burnt out. When you think about, your career and you look back, were there times that you could pinpoint and say, boy, that's when the burnout was really on me, and I too was looking for a way out? Like, I know how much of a wrestling fan, and you've even called yourself a junkie. You just can't stop consuming wrestling. And I appreciate that about you, but I'm sure there's been a point when you can look back and say, man, at that point, I'd have done anything to do something else. I was over it. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Conrad, and that is something that, man, I could tell you a conversation I had with Keith Mitchell a few times, and Keith Wiseow, he's like I don't know, that wise uncle that I would always hang up the phone and say, man, I need to talk with him more often. That came my final days of TNA a couple of times. That happened in, 15, because Keith came out and did the Global Force tapings in Vegas. It happened in 16 and 17. So I've had all conversations that Keith, kind of as a general rule, Conrad, I don't know if you know this or we've had this conversation. He always kind of had a marker in his mind that once a quarter, he took some type of vacation, whether it was float in the Red River, and I hope I'm not sharing too much personal stuff, but he would go snow skiing or float the Red River down in Texas, or just get away. I never took that to heart, and there's been times in my career that I wish I would have. But the first time that I can say that it really, really contributed was July of 95. From the time, started in there October of 93, a little before that, I substituted for the King and worked some Bret Hart loops. But anyway, and then the Double J character got up and running, and I was on everything and happy too. But with my situation, just it never slowed down. And I'm not bitching, and I'm not doing the old man back in my day, but the schedule was 10 off, 10 on, 3 off, 4 on, 2 or 3 off. But Royal Rumble 95, IC champ, which meant, okay, Jeff, go do this on sale. Jeff, we need you in the office up at Titan Studios to do a couple of commercial spots or whatever it was. Conrad, so from really from 93 to July of 95, there were no breaks. And especially from January of 95 to July. And that's when me and Road Dog did our walkout, if you will. And we've covered that in a couple of times. But that wasn't the main reason. But I am certainly sure, and I was a couple of years after it. And as I sit here today, 25 years removed, Conrad, I am absolutely positive it contributed much more than I thought, that I didn't make rational decisions in a lot of ways. At TNA, there was a couple of spells that I never took time off. During Jill's sickness, I couldn't take any really time off on wearing both caps. 2011 and 12, and I know I'm getting long-winded here, Conrad, but there has been definite times where I just didn't come up for air, and to this day I can't say that I regret it, but I've certainly changed for the better about it. Burnout will kill you, and it will make you make the most irrational decisions, candidly, that you just go, what the hell was I thinking? And as I've learned in my sobriety, you can just say you weren't thinking. That simple.
Let's talk about Jeff Hardy here in 2004. The opportunity to work with him is a big deal for TNA. He's going to come back here, so it's not really his debut. This is his second appearance. He's going to get a superstar reaction, but maybe it's not for a lack of trying behind the scenes. There's a report that he missed multiple flights, and finally you get him there for the show. And I understand there were going to be some buses to transport talent. He oversleeps. The talent have to wait a half hour. A lot of people are sort of upset about that and feel like it's disrespectful. Monty Brown is pretty vocal, saying, hey, my breakfast is going to get cold. This is all in the torch. And allegedly, Frankie Kazarian is asked by the office, hey, can you help, for lack of a better word, be Jeff's handler and make sure that he's where he's supposed to be? And there's even one wrestler who tells Wade Keller, hey, Jeff is weird. But another wrestler says, no, he's just got like this rock star aura about him. But he's not pretentious like a Teddy Hart. That was the narrative on Teddy in this era. What can you tell us about Jeff and the difficulties with just being reliable, if that's the right word?
Again, we're kind of talking a time frame, and this is Conrad, can you help me on dates? That'll help me kind of
July 21st, 2004.
Yeah, so we are already into 2004. Nero Hardy came in, and we've covered this. Another thing we've covered, when he came in 2003, I think, for the one-off, and I said it, hey, Jeff, do a one and done. This kind of opportunities come up. It's one of the loudest, if not the loudest pop I had ever heard in the sports arena. And that covers the Fabs. That covers the King. That covers a lot of ground. I mean, rock star reaction, unbelievable. And he was in a relaxed headspace. At this point, Conrad, we started talking more of, hey, man, can you, we're not asking you full time, but, what are your thoughts about, let's figure out a series of dates. And Jeff, in a mental space, just was not in a place where he wanted to do it. And it showed. And so these days of TNA, now we're right at 2 years in, and A, trying to make the business go, and B, give the talent as much work as possible. We're in the transition, about to move to Orlando. We had early discussions on how do we do some co-pros, and we'll call them live events, getting the guys more work, but kind of growing into that natural progression of being, I'll call it a full 360 wrestling promotion. Jeff just was, maybe burnout. He wasn't there, and so I chuckled in the notes when it said, "Oh, Frankie was in charge of him." I don't think he was ever officially, although Bob Ryder could have said something that I wasn't aware of because Frankie's always been, I mean, super duper reliable. That Bob might have said, either joking or in jest or kind of ribbon on the square, "Hey, Frankie, you're in charge. We need to make sure Jeff is on the bus," and all that went with it. But Jeff was just not in a headspace. And people said, "Well, why would you have him a part of it?" I can just tell you, when we are in this era of TNA, we're about to go on Fox Sports or just got on Fox Sports. Names like Sting, Jeff Hardy, and we could go through a few others. But Jeff was a guy, quote unquote, in his prime. Now, Sting went on to wrestle another 15, 20 years, but they knew Sting was in the legend category. DirecTV, Dish, In Demand, all of those folks wanted, they truly looked at Jeff. If I had to look at the roster sheet in front of me, I may be missing one or two of them, but they looked at him as not just a cut above the rest, way, way above the rest. Because you got to remember, he's coming off that WWE run that he was super successful, and we wanted him a part of it, and so did the pay-per-view companies, and so did Fox Sports Net.
I love the idea of you giving Jeff Hardy another shot. Of course, we know that he had been cut by WWE in 2003. You have talked a lot about sobriety and BS Jeff, before sobriety Jeff. This is 20 years ago. With the benefit of hindsight, based on what you've learned and you've just grown and matured, would you have handled any of this Jeff Hardy stuff differently? I mean, I know everybody was doing their absolute best 20 years ago, but with the wisdom you've gained with your walk with sobriety over the last several years, would you have done things differently back then if you had a do-over? Now, obviously, you didn't have that skills or that skill set or knowledge base or what have you, but you've evolved, you've grown, and when you look back, are there moments where you think, man, I wish I had a do-over on that, or I'd handled this a little differently, that sort of thing?
Conrad, what are you talking about? Not just in Hardy decisions across the board, but, I had to be brought to that valley truly to have the ability to look up and say, okay, where have I done wrong? And boy, oh boy, is that a list a mile long. But look, I knew, and I was a mess myself, but maybe not as big a mess, but I knew Jeff was not. Look, me and Jeff got to know each other in the 90s. He came in and was enhancement matches, Poughkeepsie, New York, and all the different small New York towns, 94, 95. And so that's how far back our relationship goes. And the Hardy Boys get up and running, and you just alluded to. So me and him have always been personal friends. So getting the opportunity to say, "Hey, Jeff, I completely understand you're not in the right headspace, but I'm building a company over here." He's in Carolina. I'm in Tennessee. It's an easy shot. We're going to make this work for you. What do we need to work? And he was eager to come, but understanding the disease like I do now, in a lot of ways, was I an enabler and just didn't know it? Maybe I was wanting to get him to be a part of our show, but I was also maybe giving him an opportunity. But he just wasn't ready for it. I think today he would absolutely say that he wasn't in a good headspace. He wasn't ready to work in TNA or anywhere else. But there's a number of ways I would have had different conversations with him and really said, "Hey, Jeff, let's move the TNA discussion aside." And Conrad, the first thing I would have said, I'd have said, "Jeff, how can I help you?" And that's where the conversation would have started.
It's always awesome to do these podcasts with you because we not only get to talk about old school wrestling, but we just talk about just life. And I appreciate that you're always so open and honest and candid. And man, I'm still pulling for Jeff Hardy. I mean, what an incredible superstar career he's had. He's still got some gas left in the tank. I can't wait to see what's next for him. What's next for you guys, though, is Raven is going to come back. He has been sort of on again, off again with TNA at times. What was the? Is that just cash and creative, the two C's, as JR says, or was there something else at play with the Raven sort of on again, off again approach, or was it simply, hey, that's where our business model was at the time? We're not signing long term contracts. We're bringing guys in for shots and trying to see what works and get a rhythm.
Well, we'll call a guy. I think you have in this era, you had guys, and I'm not saying AJ Styles and Chris Daniels had been around, much longer actually than AJ, but there's kind of a nucleus of guys, Chris Harris, James Storm. Then in a lot of ways, TNA was their home, and we'll call it their first break. Bobby Roode, Eric Young. There was kind of a nucleus of guys, and then and I'm talking about from day one, 2002, 2003, 2004, as we're kind of talking about this. Then you had other guys that had runs in WCW or WWF or ECW or all the above, or maybe even a Japan run or two or a Mexico run or two. Raven fit in that category. So Raven and many others really had no interest in signing, quote unquote, an exclusive contract, because who's to say that Raven wouldn't say, hey man, I might get another run at WWF if the right opportunity comes up, or I might get this. I'd rather just kind of date TNA as opposed to marry them. And on our side, ours was the exact same way. We knew we couldn't pay these guys enough to really, we'll say, take the lead on their contractual status. But Raven was always a value. And again, kind of the philosophy of booking and creating an excitement in the show that I believe you have to appeal to the masses. And I think the masses, in this era, we gave them heavyweights and tags and the beginning of a knockouts division, but certainly the X division was one of our calling cards. But I never shied away, and you can kind of look at the list of who's who, from Raven and Sandman and Sabu and Just Incredible and several others. But Raven's Clockwork Orange House of Fun match, we always would use the hardcore element. And the thing that to me always separated Raven from all the rest of, and I say this with diplomacy, but Raven was set apart from all the hardcore guys, is that from an episodic nature, he can tell a story, he can talk, and he can also wrestle. So he just didn't have to wrestle hardcore, but that character lent itself to it. But he was a valuable commodity that we used a lot through the years.
Looking at action figures makes me think about being a kid. And when I was a kid, man, there was nothing better than waking up first thing on the weekends and running and plopping down in front of the TV and watching cartoons and then wrestling. But I did that with a big bowl of cereal. But then as an adult, we realized, hey, I probably shouldn't be eating all that sugar. And my wife tells me I need more protein in the morning. And that's how she found Magic Spoon. If you're looking to feel nostalgic about, the way wrestling or action figures used to make you feel, well, Magic Spoon cereal tastes just like your childhood favorites, but without the sugar and with a ton of protein. And if you're already a Magic Spoon fan, boy, do we have some big news for you. Magic Spoon has turned their super popular cereal into high protein treats that are light, crispy, and taste just like those classic crunchy cereal bars. You know the ones. They're my favorite for a midnight snack. My wife uses them as a pre-workout, and every serving of Magic Spoon, their cereal, has 13 grams of protein, 0 grams of sugar, and 4 grams of net carbs. So you can really feel good about what you're eating. The most popular flavors are fruity and cocoa, but there's many more. And their brand new treats from Magic Spoon are crispy, crunchy, and airy. It really is an easy way to get 12 grams of protein on the go. Think about that. For the first time ever, you've got protein on the go like this. You can throw it in your bag. You can take it with you to the office. You can keep one in the car. Like wherever you are, you need a little pick-me-up, you need some protein, Magic Spoon is there. By the way, for the first time ever, Magic Spoon treats are available in grocery stores with delicious flavors like marshmallow and chocolatey peanut butter. And when I say marshmallow, you know what I'm talking about. But now instead of being loaded with sugar, it's loaded with protein. How do you beat that? Get $5 off your next order at magicspoon.com/myworld, or just look for Magic Spoon on Amazon or in your nearest grocery store. That's magicspoon.com/myworld for $5 off. Magic Spoon. Hold on to the dream.
Let's talk about some other names, maybe some names that are ruffling some feathers. There's a report in the Torch. Well, let me just read it to you. Big Vito continues to ruffle feathers in the locker room, carrying with him his reputation from ECW. Wrestlers describe him as vain and very unpopular. He's also drawn the ire of some of the crew members at the Nashville hotel the wrestlers stay in each week by answering the door nude and not covering himself when the cleaning crew arrives. Boy, the idea that this is in the Torch is crazy talk. But I've never heard that about Big Vito. Have you heard that he was vain or very unpopular? What can you tell us about Big Vito and TNA?
You know, one of the things I noticed in the research here, look, we've talked about my dad having a conversation with the Torch. And obviously during these days, you know, Bob Ryder had started OneWrestling.com. Now it's, oh my gosh.
PW Insider.
PW Insider, yes, but OneWrestling.com morphed to PW Insider, but and then obviously you had the Observer, but we'll call it the Journalist. And I think you may agree or disagree, but I kind of feel that during this time, WWE probably was a little, I'm sure Dave had his sources and Wade had their sources and Mike and all that, but there just wasn't quite as much news, so to speak, but you got to create content. The Journalist did. And so they worked hard. You know, again, my dad was one of their sources. So very opinionated, but when you get down to the granular fact that Vito answered supposedly, what's the word, kind of allegedly, supposedly answered the door nude in the Nashville hotel. That's pretty granular. And so I never heard that. Do I think there's an opportunity or a chance for that to happen? Of course it was. But look, being the brash New Yorker that Vito is, he never had a problem telling you his opinion. And if you don't like it, just stick around because he's going to try to convince you that he's right. And I say that in a lovingly way. But, you know, Vito, I don't say you either loved him or hate him, but man, he was brash and just super, super, super opinionated. And that obviously rubs some folks the wrong way. To what degree, I have no idea, but it sure made good content for the Torch this week.
Let's talk about Monty Brown. It's written here, Monty Brown is showing signs that his push is going to his head. In addition to the fit he threw on the bus because Jeff Hardy was late, Brown has also rubbed some wrestlers the wrong way. Others say they aren't the least bit surprised that Brown's push is going to his head, nor should anyone else be. Quote, it's too much too soon, one wrestler observed. The wrestler went on to say that it's the same attitude that Brock Lesnar, Bill Goldberg, and other wrestlers who didn't pay their dues before receiving big pushes developed. Listen, I hadn't heard this before. I mean, this is a guy who walked away from the business to take care of his family, so it's hard for me to get totally bought in on this. Is this sour grapes, or did you see a change in Monty?
So, Conrad, and we don't talk politics on this show by design, but I'm just going to kind of give you a hypothetical here. But no, it's not. I've done it before. I'll watch a far left news station for a day, and then the next day I'll watch a far right because I want to hear both sides. I'll watch ESPN highlights, and then you can watch or pregame. You can watch Fox on one day and CBS the next day, and all this. And you can hear kind of story after story after story, and then buy in. Then all of a sudden, that one kind of outlier story that makes your head turn, you go, well, that's total BS. And if that's BS, probably all the other crap we're hearing has a shred of BS, if we'll put that out there. Never, ever, never, ever did I think Monty Brown was egotistical or his push going. Not at all. And here's what's so bizarre. Really getting to know Monty. He played in the NFL. Marv Levy was happy to support him and do newspaper interviews and press interviews. And, I don't think you will ever confuse Monty of, being a Hall of Famer that's going to be going to Canton. And so that, but for the character the guy is, always stood out to me. And man, oh man, he wanted to learn so bad and had all the tools. And he knew that his athleticism and his charisma were getting into the dance, but he wanted to get better and better. So Conrad, total BS that is reported. And I'm saying Wade heard this from somebody else. So consider that source. It's just jealousy, complete talent jealousy, which happens. So I'm not raining on the torch. I'm raining on whoever the unnamed source was.
There's another comment here that Dallas, which is the character name that we know as Lance Hoyt, is using. He's just freshly signed with the company, I think, starting back in March. Here we are in July, and there's a report from Wade. He's being commended commended by wrestlers for his attitude. He has a reputation for admitting that he's not good as a wrestler and going out of his way to get better by asking veterans for their advice. It feels like he's almost universally loved. Like, I've never met anybody who doesn't like Lance Hoyt. Like, just an easy guy to get along with and have a conversation with, and a larger than life human being who's got a great look and doesn't have a reputation for hurting anyone. And I know he's been under contract with AEW for a long, long time, and I'm hoping that that's as fruitful as he hopes. But it doesn't surprise me that he's getting praise here in the Torch. How about you?
So this is one of those things that I'll just tell the quick story, Conrad, but it's something that probably, I don't know, Karen, or maybe you will go, how the hell do you remember that? But I remember it's like it's yesterday. Orlando, Florida, Impact Zone. Just ate another probably terrible meal from catering, but we're walking back to the dressing room. And as TV days go, you pass people sometimes 7, 8, 9, 10 times all this. But Dallas, as we called him, because he's a Texan, was always a great attitude. But I ended up having about no more than 5-minute conversation but I could take you to the golf cart area that I had it. But the light bulb clicked when I found out he's a college quarterback and an athlete, all his, upbringing and everything that goes with it. And you look at him, and I guess Lance would be 6'6". He's a big old dude. But when I heard that he, not just an athlete, but a team athlete in with that size at the college level, it just kind of clicked. Okay, this guy is uber coachable. He's so coachable. He wants to learn, but that's kind of a mindset, man. You get young guys, and Conrad, probably on this My World YouTube show that we're going to keep cranking up. It's going to be interesting when I give my feedback, Connie, that some guys, they just don't want to hear it. They think they want to hear it, but they don't want to hear it. Lance is a different deal. I think throughout his career, he's always been a sponge. And in the early days here, that picture that Silva put up, man, what a young Lance Hoyt. But great dude. And man, oh man, very, very coachable. Very, very. The Rock and Rave connection had legs, and we've discussed this over and over and over. We just didn't have space. A 2-hour show, kind of a smaller tag team division, but those guys had legs because they had a unique kind of charisma to them.
Let's talk a little bit about another report. This is the era where you're doing 6 sides of steel, which is a totally different look, I think, than a regular steel cage with 4 sides. and it became a staple for TNA. Well, AMW, America's Most Wanted, and the Naturals are two early standout tag teams in the sort of the early days of TNA, and they had an incredible match. But there were some people in the torch who were critical of this. Well, specifically, some of the other talent. I guess people were poking fun that all four men walked through the entire cage match prior to the show. And people were sort of making fun of that. And another veteran wrestler told Wade, they don't know any better. No one taught them, and there's nowhere for them to go learn. So this is something that we've heard a lot from old school folks like, oh man, they talked about their match for 2 hours. Back in my day, we used to just call it in the ring. But back in those days, you also had a territory system that was running 5, 6, 7, sometimes 9 shows a week. And that's not where we are here. These guys are wrestling once a week for TNA and maybe on the independents over the weekend, they'll work another time or two, but the reps are just different. It's not the same business. You're a guy who was around the old way where we just called everything in the ring. And now these days where we take a more Randy Savage approach and we know exactly what we're doing. So you've seen both sides. What do you think about the evolution of the business, or is that it? It really is just the evolution. It's got to change.
It just, again, going back to the comments were made, they just don't know any better. That is the biggest crock of shit, Connie. That is, to me, it screams of haters gonna hate. It screams, hey, I'm a loser and I know it, so let me point a finger at somebody. But when you're pointing a finger at somebody, you probably got 3 or 4 pointing back at you because you know that you're not going to put the emotional investment. Me and Lawler had this conversation years ago, because if you ever work with Lawler, I mean, Conrad, it amazed me. It's as if, and he can, in a lot of ways, the art of it, talking under his breath, but then all of a sudden be talking to the ref at a decibel 4 and 5 higher, and then lower it, and he talked to your opponent, and the amount of conversations, and if it's a spot show, he can probably tell you a few jokes in the middle of it. But the communication that you have when there are no cameras is obviously completely different than when you're, DDP. I'm going to kind of give you a little progression in my brain off the top of my head. But so when there's not 7 or 8 cameras all over the place, you can have much more of a slow paced, and you can call everything in the ring and the pacing, because you're really just worried about that live event crowd. And that's all you have to open your ear to. Well, Progress, and I'll never forget DDP in Chicago United Center with his T-Mobile phone and stylus and notepad and everything that went with it. And people are like, oh, Jeff, I know this driving you crazy. And I'm thinking, are you freaking nuts? In my mind, I'm like, no, it's a guidepost, because when you have time cues to hit, 7 or 8 cameras, shooting your match, which means they're coming from all different angles, microphones everywhere, you got to have an ebb and a flow and kind of know what you're doing. And for 4 young guys, I'll call them pretty much young. The Naturals all those guys were in their 20s, I think. If not early 30s, maybe. And so them wanting to lay out their match, it's like the conversation that I had with my dad in early 2002 when I'm trying to explain about the X Division. I said, Dad, he's like, well, I've heard it's a bunch of high spots. And I said, yeah, and what's your point? Well, you got to tell stories. Well, no. We'll tell stories. You've always taught me you need one story and one personal issue to draw money, but you got to have a 2-hour show on this pay-per-view. So just all the ebb and flow of it. Conrad, I believe it is a sign of passion, and you care when you walk through things and block things and frame things. But the things where it gets to another level, if you have the foundation built, and you know your time, and you know your opponent, and you've got several layers, if you will, of things that are laid out, the real pros then get out there live and listen and have, I'll call it a bit of a nuanced ad lib that takes the match to another level. To me, that's what I've always seen the really, really good folks do is that they've got, for the most part, more than a roadmap. They've got quite a bit, a few things laid out, but to really make it a great money drawing match, they do things that were not laid out in the back that spontaneously came about came about organically, and then you knock it out of the park. I just think that's how the business has evolved. Connie, that was a long-winded answer. Sorry about that, pal.
No, it was a great answer. That's what we're tuning in for. I want to ask you about Antonio Pena. I know that you've got a great relationship with Dorian at AAA, but it's written 20 years ago now that you and Antonio Pena weren't necessarily best of friends. It's written Jarrett is still upset with Pena for showing up late to their meetings and for not sending him talent that he specifically asked for. Recent AAA defector Hector Garza hasn't appeared on any TNA shows lately. So apparently the relationship between Pena and TNA is on good enough terms that Jarrett doesn't want to rock the boat by using Garza. We haven't spent hardly any time talking about your relationship with Antonio Pena. I mean, I know how tight you are with Dorian, but what was your relationship like with Mr. Pena?
And if I only had been, again, the language barrier, when you're dealing with, I'm the promoter of TNA and he's the promoter of AAA, but we got a language barrier. So we didn't have the opportunity to, hey, let's have a sidebar and I'll tell you things in confidence and you tell me things in confidence. And we can kind of get on the level. So I know what you're thinking and you know what I'm thinking. Unfortunately, not any other reason other than the language barrier. We never got to have that because when I went there, we'll say, his English was certainly a lot better than my Spanish. But regardless, we needed somebody in the room more or less to make sure some translation. So when I'm down there, we'll call it his translator. And when I'm in Nashville, mine. But that being said, it was still, we'll call it somebody that's in the room. We always had a fantastic relationship. I respect him. Conrad, when a generation from now, and obviously things will change, but we're going to be another step away, I think, in a lot of ways, because, we're in this world of streaming and people, just as time goes on, I think you have to put Pena right up there at the very tip top of visionaries in professional wrestling, in a lot of ways, because he broke the mold. He walked away from the standard traditional promotion, started a promotion, and really, in a lot of ways, revolutionized Mexico in professional wrestling. Had a great relationship, but here's kind of where I'm going with, and what was your specific question? Because I'll kind of tell you where it broke down, which I had no idea till months, if not a year later. But it all clicked on me when I'm like, damn, why didn't he just kind of say that? So what was your actual question, Conrad?
I was just asking about your relationship with Antonio Pena. That's all.
So when great relationship and the World X Cup and the talent exchanges and he brought me to Mexico as a talent and poured a ton of gas on. I mean, that to this day, I think the way I was entered into the market as a talent and consistently pushed in those first couple of years, I think still in a lot of ways resonates to this day in a real positive way. And that's all Antonio Pena. But the communication, it said he was late. I think there were a couple of times he promised me he was coming up. But Conrad, little did I know that he came up. We enjoyed working. He was delivering talent and everything that went with it. And then little by little, he began to believe, and not specifically TNA, but really the U.S. all over again, is that he said, now, I went through this in the 90s and I lost this talent and that talent and this talent and that talent. And he began to think, do I really want to partner up with a U.S. promotion? They're just going to steal my talent again, because a lot of guys went from his promotion to WCW as a part of that cruiserweight infusion of talent, and you couldn't compare American dollars to Mexican pesos, and it really depleted his roster. He didn't want to go down that road again. And had we been able to have that conversation and basically say, I would have said, Pena, what kind of document do you want me to sign for you to know I want to use these guys? I don't have the ability to steal them even if I wanted to, but to give you a comfort level, this is a talent exchange, as opposed to, well, you're going to send this guy. Nope. Can't make him. Going to send this guy. No, I got him booked here. And that's where it just kind of began to break down, but he didn't want to lose talent to America. And that was where the real breakdown began. On top of hindsight's 2020, he obviously was dealing with his own personal demons.
Wow. Okay. I did not know that. Hey, there's something else in the notes. The notes that Pena had stuff.
Oh, I got you. I thought you were talking about the talent exchange. Yeah. Yes, he did.
Let's talk a little bit about FX. There's some talk in the TNA locker room that you had been meeting with FX officials. And as the story goes, FX officials told Jarrett that they were interested but wanted to see how Impact performed in the ratings over a 3-month period. Does that sound right? What can you tell us about FX?
So from the day that I'll say, made the decision that, hey, the Asylum, we're up and running, and the churn rate, the burn rate on cash, and the revenues, it was all, I can't say stable, but it was understood. But the Carters and myself, how do we grow this? Well, let's figure out. We have a product now. We are another year or 2 years or 2.5, 3 years away from the Attitude Era. WWE keeps churning along, a publicly traded company. They've got 3 years of, I'll call it a PG product or beginning of a PG product under their belt. And so talking about TV, and we never signed exclusively with an agent. The product just wasn't there yet, but we had multiple conversations, and I made with Dixie and without Dixie several trips to LA just to have different conversations. And FX was one of them. And it goes back to, well, can you bring us ratings? Just the exact same rinse and repeat conversation that I had so many times prior to Spike. What can you deliver? Let me see who you have on your roster, all those kind of conversations. And that's why we, made the decision, hey, let's go get on Fox Sports. It's going to be expensive, but at least now we're not producing just pay-per-view content. We're going to produce a TV show as well.
So by now you've definitely heard me talking about Mando's whole body deodorant at this point. And I got to tell you, a lot of people don't know this, but I discovered it through my wife. I think we've talked about it on the show. She's doing lots of fitness competitions and things like that. And she found, in an effort to get ready, she was like, hey, I want to make sure I don't smell anywhere at all. And how about controlling odor for 72 hours? It's been clinically proven with Mando. And when they say whole body, they mean whole body. It's dermatologist tested and gentle on all your bits. My wife actually started using the cream tube, and I have to admit, that threw me off. I'm like, wait a minute, you're applying it to your fingers and then just spreading it around? That feels weird. I think I need like a stick of deodorant. Guess what? Mando's got you covered. That's right. The whole body formula is not just in cream tube fashion, but also stick deodorant. It's long lasting, developed by a doctor, doesn't cause you any sort of irritation. It smells really good, and they've got a great selection of cologne quality scents. Things like bourbon leather or clover woods or Mount Fuji, or how about Pro Sport? Maybe you want to be a little stealthy? Check out Unscented. That's the one for you. But Mando really does it all, man. They got the Deo cream tube. They got the body wash. They've even got a cleansing bar. This is like an all-in-one. As a dude, I love traveling with this. It'll give me a sudsy lather so I could even shave with it if I really wanted to. But what I really like is the idea that I don't have to worry about packing soap and shampoo and conditioners and I got it all right here, all in one with this cleansing bar. The deodorant wipes, game changer for Tony Schiavone and anybody who travels for a living. We're talking 24-hour odor control for your pits, your packages, your feet, and beyond. But it's great for on-the-go use and travelers. It's like taking a shower without actually taking a shower. I'm a big believer in this product. I know you will be too. And I want to mention this cream tube. Well, it can boost confidence when it's time for adult playtime, if you know what I'm talking about. This is for those hard to reach areas. This is an invisible cream that doesn't get on your clothes and is going to make sure that, well, you can let the good times roll. It was created by a doctor who saw firsthand how BO was just being misdiagnosed and mistreated, and he's created something really special here. It's aluminum free, it's baking soda free, it's cruelty free, it's dye free, and we're going to get you stink free with Mando's starter pack. It's perfect for new customers. It comes with that solid stick deodorant, the cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice. I recommend the mini body wash and the deodorant wipes, and free shipping. Now, luckily, I got a discount to get you hooked up on my favorite easy for me to say, my favorite smelling whole body deodorant. And you know what? It's probably the biggest selling whole body deodorant on the market today. New customers can get $5 off a starter pack with our exclusive code. Man, that's like 40% off your starter pack. Just use my code MyWorld at shopmando.com. That's SHOPMANDO.com. Shopmando.com. Hit that promo code MyWorld. You'll be glad you did. Let's talk a little bit about the pivot from weekly pay-per-views. You mentioned, we've got the afternoon spot now with Fox Sports Net. FSN is where we're going to have that show. And there's lots of speculation before it actually is made official. But ultimately, a decision comes down that the weekly pay-per-views are going to cease on September 8th, 2004. So prior to moving to do the Fox Sports Net stuff in Orlando, there's about 6,000 buys week in, week out for TNA. And there's speculation in the Observer that means that the company is probably losing around $100,000 a week, which doesn't seem like that's possible. But there's also a report from the Torch that maybe part of the idea of switching to a traditional monthly Sunday pay-per-view is because maybe they've lost some confidence over at DirecTV in this weekly initiative. It doesn't feel like they're promoting it as much or pushing it as much. But perhaps if we move to a more traditional Sunday, once a month format that they're familiar with from WWE, and we offer it a little cheaper, instead of being $34.95, it's $29.95 or maybe even $24.95. If it's a little more affordable and once a month, maybe DirecTV would get on board. That's what's all speculated in the newsletters. But Jeff, you lived it. What really led to the end of weekly TNA pay-per-views?
What I want to make sure, because I want to make sure I always circle back. What led to it? Well, what we know now, we didn't know then. And so diving into producing TV starting in June of 2004, so June, July, and August, we said, let's start producing content and looking at the burn rate. And I think it was closer to 10, but we'll, observers reporting 6. And man, oh man, if you could have seen Dallas accounting, because the buys that would come in, and I don't want to a tangent, but the buys report come in monthly, but some months you have 5 Wednesdays, some months you have 4 Wednesdays. And so a buy would come in to try to keep track of all that. Was a nightmare. But with all that being said, the pay-per-view companies, they adapted to us. We've never done a weekly pay-per-view, episodic. And so their comfort feeling obviously was monthly pay-per-views. They could schedule it better. They knew weekends were a better revenue stream, all the above. They always wanted us to go on weekends. Well, they couldn't give us every Saturday or Sunday night because of WWE or UFC, whatever it may be. But when we when we sat down and looked at, okay, if we're going to Orlando to start producing content, it's going to make sense sooner rather than later that even if we did the Wednesday pay-per-views all to do it under one roof. Well, when you just start doing the simple math and say, okay, we're probably a lot better off to do 4 TVs and a pay-per-view and let go of the Nashville rent, let go of the lights, let go, basically shut down Nashville. Conrad, it wasn't a hard decision to make financially, knowing that, okay, this is the progression of the product. One of the things that surprised, I remember my dad, me, Bob Ryder, a few other folks, is that people had got in a groove and people had changed. Like, oh no, you're not going to give up Wednesdays in Nashville. And we're thinking, the hell we ain't. Yeah, yes, we absolutely are going to give them up as things progress. What we were just not sure of is what can we really do once a month on Sunday? And the thing that kind of put a monkey wrench in there that we had to take a leap of faith was DirecTV and Dish. They could not promise us a Sunday, period. And we got it because they said WWE is precedence and most of your major boxing stuff is on Saturday. So we certainly can't give you a Saturday, and we can't really give you a Sunday until we know the date the WWE is going to hold. So they were moving targets, and we kind of knew that. And we were like, okay, what's the worst that could happen, and played all the scenarios out. So from a financial perspective, making the move and keeping the episodic nature, that's how professional wrestling, I think, is the magic of it. When you look even to this day of all forms of wrestling, the episodic nature is what sets us apart. But that being said, financially, Conrad, no brainer. How we were going to execute it, when we were going to execute it, the transition of it all, we just kind of had to put a plan in place, and which wasn't really, really difficult, but it was changed for everybody, including Panda, and Panda wanted to wrap their head around it because we had to always put in the back of our mind, okay, hypothetically, what happens if Fox Sports pulls the plug and they're like, hey, we'd love to take your money, but that can't work out. Okay, well, DirecTV, Dish, In Demand, you know what? We're going to have you guys go on a Friday this month because the Sunday's held and whatever. It's just kind of the hypotheticals of, what is best and worst case scenario. But once we kind of extrapolated all of it out, played it out, made the decision, it became apparent this is the direction we're going. And if something happens that unforeseen circumstances, we'll pivot again because we knew the simple math, Conrad, 4 TV shows and a once a month pay-per-view. If we, because you don't know how many repeat buyers you have and the revenue coming in, it just made sense. This is the direction we're going because, again, it became much more, I'll call it, since the mid-90s, the traditional format that our monthly pay-per-views, and that's where we headed.
Let's talk a little bit about the shift here, or the swing, as we're trying to get ready for this new switch, a paradigm shift from weekly to monthly. I mentioned earlier that it looks like we're going to be losing $100,000 a week. I mean, that's not realistic. What was the state of TNA just before Fox Sports Net? I mean, I understand we got some red ink, but do you have any idea of guessing, what that red ink looked like on a weekly basis or a monthly basis?
So roughly the burn was 100 a week in Nashville. And let's just say 10,000 $10 buys at $5 a piece.
That's 50 grand.
That's what I'm saying. It'd be a 50 grand burn rate.
Okay.
So, $500,000 a year. But
well, I mean, 50 grand would be more than half, would be more than that. I mean, you'd be talking 2 million, 2.5 million a year in losses.
Yes.
When you're having discussions with the Carters and Panda specifically, I know that
2 million a year, even if it's 60 grand a week.
If it's 50 grand a week, it's 200 grand a month. So 200 grand times 12 is 2.4.
Got it. Yeah.
There's another 2 in there. I'm just rounding, and it feels like around 2.5.
Yes, 2.5. That's because I was like, where do you get 2? Yeah.
So my question is, the Carters, because these days, and boy, I'm not trying to draw parallels, but there is one, and I'm not going to sit here and say I know the complexities of what's going on in AEW or what their financial situation looks like, and blah blah blah. But I think everybody knew going in, if you're going to start a wrestling company, it's got to be a long-term proposition. You're going to have some long-term thinking, and most businesses lose money in the first year or 2 or 3, and then they get going, and then hey, they can recover some of that initial investment. That's not uncommon. But I wanted to ask, from your perspective, did the Carters get that? Did they know this was going to be a long-term play and a long-term investment? Did you know right up front, hey, they're in it for the long haul. They understand they're going to shoulder some losses for $2 or $3 million a year. But they think when we get to this point, and we know that eventually TNA does, but do you think that Bob and Janice were tuned into that right up front?
So before they signed the deal, which all went down Labor Day weekend of 2002, a couple of conversations rushed. But over the next year or 2 years, when you understand Panda Energy International, but more importantly, Bob Carter, the world that he comes from, a Texas Wildcatter, and Conrad, you will appreciate this from a business perspective. When you're in the oil business, you can drill and get all the I's dotted and T's crossed and sink hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars, and you can come up with a goose egg, like zero, that it's all gone. Your digging is you hit a dry hole. And you can do that once, twice, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You can do that a whole lot. If you hit one hole, you know what the return is on that. It's just so that's the mindset that Bob was born and raised on long before wrestling came around. That he completely understood that I think, and look, he kind of alluded to this in a couple of years. I'll say in a way attracted to it. He respected that when I went out there, he looked at a father-son and, oh, wait a minute. Okay, the son has a third more money or 2/3 of the money put up more than his father in this deal. And it's his own money. Okay, he believes in this concept, and so does his old man, or his old man's crazy and just supporting the son. But regardless, it wasn't just Richard Scrushy money. It was our money. And then he understood, okay, Scrushy comes from Hell South. They were rocking and rolling. Richard Scrushy at the time that everything went south was the number 3 or 4 highest paid CEO in the world. That, okay, this is kind of the investment mindset. I'm kind of trying to paint a picture, Connie, is that not only yes, but hell yes, he knew that he wasn't gonna put $1 million or 2 in and pull the slot machine and here it comes, 777s, and we're just gonna walk off into the sunset. Did he want that? Did he press for that? Did he handle everything with a kid glove? Did he really squeeze the money when we started? And I think because of the entertainment world, and maybe they do that in the energy business, but when we started making money with Spike, went from 1 to 2 hours, he was really taking it off the top because he did want his money back, because he had 400, 500 Panda Energy International investors that got into Panergy for the energy business. And now all of a sudden, okay, they're in the wrestling business. Well, let me show these guys a return on their investment, that it's already coming in. That we're 3 years into this and we're already getting money back. That doesn't happen in the energy business all the time. Like I said, they can invest in power plants around the world, and I'll say in oil opportunities around the world, and come up with nothing. They made their billions in power plants, in building power plants, and you had to line that up geographically and government wise and all kinds of stuff. But I say all this to say, Conrad, Bob was well aware that there was a risk, and he more than had deep enough pockets to weather any storm. Very obvious.
Let's talk a little bit about how this switch is going to affect some of the talent. When you're going to abandon the weekly pay-per-views, once upon a time, these guys could get 8 or 9 or 10 dates a month because they're going to be doing stuff in Orlando and they're going to be doing the weekly pay-per-views. But if we're going to move away from the weekly pay-per-views and now it's just going to be monthly, there's a concern that some of these guys are going to lose 3 or 4 or maybe more bookings. And if they're paid on a per appearance deal, that greatly affects their income. I understand you're trying to run a business and let's not make their problem become your problem and all that sort of thing. But how much heartburn were you hearing about from the talent that, hey, does this move mean I'm going to get less dates? Am I going to make less money? That's a natural concern, I think. Chat me up. What, if anything, did you hear about this?
Well, remember I said talent didn't like change, and they had the comfort level and the asylum. We got it up and rock and rolling. The audience was good, and they just the groove of it all. But when we started Fox Sports Net, the bulk of the talent went from 4 paydays a month, 4 Wednesdays, to 8 paydays, a Wednesday and a Thursday. And then all of a sudden, as soon as we get that started, oh, no, we're going to go from 4 to 8 back to 5. And knowing that things were in flux, that may not work out. We may not get on every pay-per-view because there may or may not be less slots. And, hey, we're here that Hall and Nash may be being a part of this, or this talent or that talent, or is Hogan coming in? Again, the talent relations component, as I look back on my TNA years, the talent relations component was a nonstop juggling match. We'll call it investor relations. And I just kind of talked about in depth about from a financial perspective, just the Panda energy, the background, the mindset, the pockets they had, the understanding, but which went all fine and dandy. But when you started layering in family dynamics and relationships, and we've talked about this on all kind of different angles, that threw a whole nother monkey wrench into the relationship. So as I look back on talent relations and investor relations, those were the nonstop ebb and flow, and it never, ever stopped. And they were always super challenging because we've talked about it. We went from 4 dates to 8 dates, back to 5. Not long after that, here comes Spikes, and now we're going to do the Spike show, which in the talent's mind, okay, now we can probably get a bump in pay. Oh, my God, there's not enough spots on the card. Oh, okay, so we're going to add the second hour. So now we got 2 hours. Oh, wait a minute. We're doing 2 tapings in one night, so we're just going to pay 1 on 2 shows. Conrad, it was a challenge.
Let's talk about DirecTV here for a minute. I know there was a moment in time here where there was a little bit of an impasse between TNA and DirecTV, and even now with the decision coming out that, hey, we're going to move away from weekly and we're going to go to monthly, there's a report in the Torch that says, hey, there's still no update on the DirecTV stalemate. What exactly was the crux of that dispute, if there was one? Like, why weren't you week in, week out on DirecTV?
You're talking about on the Wednesdays, right?
Yeah, what was the dispute and why did it take so long to resolve?
Frank Romano, and he was the CEO from In Demand. We hired him. He came to work for the company. We were a pay-per-view only company. Bob Carter wanted someone who knew that business inside and out from the other side of the fence. Brought him in. Well, Frank had dealt with In Demand and Direct and everything that went with it. DirecTV has always been the powerhouse in satellite TV. They just delivered a different service. They viewed their real estate different, a premium service. Their promotional, they prided themselves in being able to promote better to their consumer than Dish or cable. And they wanted a guarantee that we had to hit It's financial, Conrad. I'm probably going a long way around that. If we didn't hit, they wanted to keep up in our thresholds that we had to hit a certain amount. And if we didn't, they could take not a lot, but a little more. And Romano was pushing back and saying, hey, we are a startup company. We need every dime we can get. And they held all the keys to their kingdom. Okay, if y'all don't want to sign our deal, we don't want your product. Well, okay. So we played hardball. They just, again, they had to meet their bottom line, and they were had much more leverage than us, and they knew it. And so they played hardball as hard as they could, and then they would say, "Okay, we're good. Put your product on." Because at the end of the day, I don't say it's free money, but we were revenue for them, and they wanted it. But again, if you back up even further, look at the revenue they lost overnight when WCW shut down. Lots of money.
And ECW. I mean, no more ECW pay-per-views, no more WCW pay-per-views. And I realized that, at different times, WCW was selling a huge multiple of what ECW was. But you would think, given all the money they'd made through the years with wrestling on pay-per-view, they would welcome more. But as you said, they're the big dog. They get to make the rules. Let's talk a little bit about Nashville. There's a report written here. Jeff Jarrett apparently fought hard to at least keep some shows in Nashville. Specifically, Jarrett lives in the area and tried to convince Dixie Carter to hold the monthly pay-per-view events in Nashville. But our source reports that she finally put her foot down and told him her decision was to leave Nashville, and it's final. There's said to be some friction between Carter and Jarrett over this move, but nothing that can't be worked out. What, if anything, can you tell us about this? I mean, obviously, you had been, Nashville was home for TNA, not just you, but I mean, week in, week out. I mean, the asylum is synonymous. And I get why you would think, boy, you want to talk about not rewarding the loyal and the faithful fans who've been there week in, week out. Hey, we're packing up. We're moving on to bigger and better things. We're going to Orlando. See you later. I see why you would want to argue for them to still get some pay-per-views, but was there more to it than that? Why were you such a fan of, if this report's even true, sticking with Nashville for some shows?
Yeah, and that was, again, that's kind of just total BS. And here's where there's just a footnote that they don't really even get into. So we made the decision to go to monthlies. Okay, are we going to do them all in Orlando? That's going to make the most sense because it's one rent under one studio. But there had been talk within our offices probably over a year. Fort Campbell, huge Army base, about 50 miles from Nashville, that I'll say, and I am not the expert on the different layers that you got to go up the chain of command, but I'll call it mid-management, for the lack of a better word, really wanted us to do an event out there. And Keith Mitchell and other production folks, we had priced it. There wasn't going to be a site fee. That's a good area. We were going to have a paid audience. And there was discussion in the offices that should we do the first monthly pay-per-view as a send-off, as a we're closing the doors down, Municipal Auditorium. Do we do one? Do we do it? Which I was leaning, and Dixie. That's what's crazy. We both were kind of leaning, man, wouldn't it be cool if we could do an armed services, do it up there at the Army base? That's kind of our calling card, if you will, for this event. A couple of years before this, I think we talked Hogan show up there, but we were going to do one final event in Nashville before we completely moved to Orlando, but it never made financial sense under any circumstance. Once we made the decision to rent Soundstage 21, Universal Studios backlot, once we dove into that, then it just made sense across the board to create all of our content under that roof. The lights were already hung. Orlando airport travel was very, very affordable. I mean, we've been through it and we could go through it multiple times. All the boxes that Orlando checked on creating content there. I mean, to this day, look, NXT's there. It just made a lot of sense.
Speaking of sense, I wanted to ask you if you could make sense of this. There's a report out there in the Torch that Mike the Miz, who the WWE had just reached out to, was apparently one of the names suggested by Johnny Fairplay as an opponent for what Johnny was doing on TNA called the Reality Television Challenge. Now, it never came to fruition, but this is a real interesting what if. I mean, we know that The Miz is going to go become a household name with WWE. He's going to beat John Cena in the main event at WrestleMania, for goodness sake. But nobody would have predicted that back here 20 years ago. Do you remember this conversation? Johnny Fairplay making this suggestion? That's a great what if, is it not?
So Johnny will probably tell you this day, he used to rib me about it. Don't you remember me pitching you Miz in the hotel room in Los Angeles? And I'm thinking, Johnny, I probably had a couple of adult beverages by that point. But yes, he did pitch it, I think, a few times, to his credit.
Wow.
But, you know, as you said, we're dealing with so many unknowns. And at this time, we're shooting TV in Nashville on a super limited budget. Not saying that Miz would have cost a lot, but I think if I remember correctly, Miz is LA based and didn't have all, obviously, his Hall of Fame career now. I love the old Miz, man, but nobody knew the direction it was going. But I tip my cat. Old Fairplay was like, yeah, he'll fit perfect for this reality show deal. But the reality of the reality show deal is that really never got off the ground. It just, come on, Johnny. It was never box office for us.
It is interesting to think, what if? Let's talk about David Sahadi. He is going to be hanging around a little bit. He's been at a few shows. Bill Banks works with TNA, and he worked with him in WWE, and he's particularly high on Sahadi. It's even written that Sahadi in this era flew in the company's private jet from Nashville to Orlando. Um, he was a legend in WWE. I mean, he created so much magic that, I mean, people still post his videos that he did such a great job with for WWE on social media all the time. How did he come to become an official part of TNA? Is Bill Banks the connective tissue, or is there more to it than that?
That's funny that on this episode we've talked about myself, you know, the ebbs and flows of Burnout. We've talked about Jeff Hardy, Burnout, but probably, you know, me and Jeff and our adult beverages may have contributed to that. I don't think it
Right.
contributed to David, but I think David came to a point that he was burnt. And I think that's the real crux of it. And I think he put in his notice and packed up his bags and you know, just started, I'll say, just living life. And he made it a point to head through, and he called me, and I'm like, okay, now you have to remember where we're at in the growth, if you will, of TNA. We did not own our post-production facilities. Our Wednesday night live shows, the Asylum, JB, I think I'm right, was our one and only editor. We did Explosion off a laptop. We didn't have a lot of packages. But again, man, love my man JB. A one-man show that wore as many hats as I did. But we didn't have a post-production facility. We just, you know, as far as packages and presentations, our open on the Wednesday night shows was just kind of a, hey, we're here. And then we put together an open for Fox Sports shows. But anyhow, Dave called and I said, hey, man, let's just have lunch. And we had a lunch, and I said, Dave, I don't know what your world looks like. And you know, I'm sitting here and I'm just going to throw all my cards on the table. Do we have a budget for you? I'm just going to say no, but you know, what will it take? And you have to know our understanding. We're paying to be on Fox Sports Net. We are, you know, in a burn rate of whatever it may be. So we are investing in the product across the board. But man, oh man, I think we're getting traction, and the investor is engaged, and we're telling our weekly episodic shows. Long story short is, we cut a deal and he came on board, And yes, I mean, I'd known him he produced With My Baby Tonight. I think you knew that. He produced the video of me and Road Dogg. So I'd work with Zahadi on Don't Piss Me Off videos and With My Baby Tonight, a couple of other projects. And so it was, hey, man, can you get on board? We don't even have a post-production department or chain of command, but we were going to build one, and Kevin Sullivan came later, and that's the building process and building blocks and the time frame of it all. But by the time we got to Spike TV, we were up and running. But we're talking about the early days of Fox Sports Net here.
Let's talk a little bit about creative. We mentioned at the top of the show that Russo had been telling people that he was going to go to seminary school. He's no longer at this point, we'll call it August, a member of the creative team. Allegedly, that's just you and Dutch. And I guess Vince is working in a more backstage role as he's trying to help produce vignettes, maybe, or at least that's the speculation. He's also an on-air talent, but talk to us about, when and why and how he was on the outside looking in from a creative.
And I'd love to have a calendar to really know, but it's very safe to say that in a lot of ways, I don't say I regret it, but I've learned from this that there was never a show written from the day we started that I didn't take input from more than one person. So I say that to say, oh, Jeff and Dutch were creative. I'm going to say Bob Ryder had a little input, Jeremy Borash, my father, Jarrett, certainly talent. And that goes with every show. They're going to put their nooks and crannies, regardless of what people say. They're going to add their spice to it. So maybe Vince wasn't officially on, we'll call it creative, but he had his input regardless. And people can say all they want. Nope, that wasn't mine. Well, okay. But that being said, yeah, we're all in this together, fortunately or unfortunately. When you sign up to say, I will take your check for my services, you're part of the team, whether you want to believe that or not. But him being officially, quote unquote, off as far as maybe coming to the house and creative plans and that deal, that could have all gone into Vince. Now you can no longer drive up from Atlanta. You're going to be commuting from Denver, which is your choice. We can't fly you in every week or every other week to be a part of the creative process, although you're still at arm's length as a part of it, among other folks as well.
Let's talk a little bit about your reputation in creative. Here's what's written in the newsletters. Jeff Jarrett's reputation as a booker is that he can't handle objective criticism and doesn't take well to storyline suggestions. Most of the wrestlers have simply thrown their hands up and now just do as they're told, as there's a better chance they'll be punished for daring to make a suggestion than there is one of their ideas actually being used. There's multiple reports from the Torch and the Observer that, man, you're kind of not flexible on creative. I know you've said in a loud and clear voice here on the show many times, creative is subjective. What do you make of this report that maybe you weren't always receptive to ideas there?
I will say this, and I just kind of got into that. Again, I learned from it. But when I look back on the times that I really conceded, how would guys know where we're going, if not long term, at least in the short term, and all the pieces of the puzzle that really factor into the decision making processes? And look, I say this with all due respect, in that at the end of the day, yes, I want to hear your input. There's no doubt, whether you're a talent, whether you're a cameraman, whether you're a grip, post-production, marketing, it takes all kinds, and you never know where a not good, but great idea is going to come from. But at the end of the day, once the decision is made from the person where the buck stops, hey guys, let's get on board and go. And that, Conrad, would really rub me the wrong way, because I would I would know it's best to bite my tongue and just say, hey, no, we're going to diplomatically, we're going to head this way. I probably didn't do a great job all the time, but look, when I look at different situations throughout this TNA time, I think back on the different people that I work for, and I can't imagine even showing the least amount of displeasure working for my old man. I mean, or Lawler. You did what they said and made it the very best you could, and there were no other options. You didn't really tell Vince, I don't know. But why don't we do it this way? I mean, yeah, and he liked ebbs and flows, and Kevin Sullivan was great about it. But at the end of the day, you by design, you have agreed to take a check from this company. And so with that being said, that means you're not the boss. When you start paying people, then you're the boss and you do exactly what you want to do. And I sometimes was not clear enough in my communication when it came down to, hey guys, I really respect it. And I'm open to all these ideas, not just today to tomorrow, but for this decision, we're going to do it this way. And we're going to do it to the best of our abilities. And guys, as we've kind of seen on a couple of different threads here on feedback, they chose to vent to the Torch or PW Insider or Observer, and people, it's the nature of the business, and always has been and always will be.
I want to tell you about a little life hack, a little cheat code that Jeff and my wife Megan have discovered. I'm talking about Lumen. Lumen is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that measures your metabolism through your breath. And on the app, it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs, and then it gives you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, your workouts, your sleep, and even stress management. Here's how it works. All you have to do is breathe into your Lumen first thing in the morning, and you'll know what's going on with your metabolism right then in real time, meaning whether you're burning mostly fats or carbs. And then Lumen will give you a personalized nutrition plan for that day based on those measurements. You can also breathe into it before and after workouts and meals, so you know exactly what's going on in your body in real time. Now, here's why your metabolic health really matters. Think of your metabolism as almost like your body's engine. It's how your body turns the foods you eat into fuel that keeps you going. And because your metabolism is at the center of literally everything your body does, optimal metabolic health translates to a bunch of health benefits like easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness results, better sleep. It even helps your focus. Lumen gives you recommendations to improve your metabolic health with each breath. You can do it before and after your meals, before and after your workouts, but it really is a cheat code. I think everybody listening to this knows that my wife is in the medical research business. And so because she is around it all the time, she gets really excited when there's an advancement like this. When we first decided we were going to test Lumen and see if we would endorse it here on the show, my wife was giddy. Like she couldn't believe what this thing does. She painted the picture for me that, and I think we've all seen this, like maybe even in the 50 Cent video, as a matter of fact, back in the day, you see a guy in a doctor's office on a treadmill wearing a mask hooked up to a bunch of wires. All of that, like you got to schedule something 6 months in advance and take off work, and you got to get hooked up to these machines, and you got to wear the mask, and you got to get on a treadmill, and the doctor's running around with a clipboard taking notes. You've got that in your hand now with Lumen. It's unbelievable. You can just throw this in your backpack, leave it on your nightstand, sit it on your desk, and it's just there with you. You breathe into this, dude, and on the app, it tells you exactly what you need to do to get the most out of your body that day. This is a real life hack from my wife. She's been doing some studying on fasting, and sort of one of the big crazes right now is like an 18-hour fast. And that sounds nice as a one-size-fits-all solution, but we actually know somebody who, using a Lumen, discovered they needed to stop their fasting at like the 11th hour, because if they got to hour 12, their body would be sort of panicked, like, hey, we're not getting anything. What's going on? We need to operate differently. So all the good that she had done by fasting for 12 hours, she would undo it for the next 6 until she ended her fast. She stopped doing that, and boy, has it made a big difference. Megan knows a doctor who's lost 45 pounds using Lumen. Think about that. A doctor. That dude knows what's going on. but he needed the hot tag from Lumen. So if you're ready to take the next step in improving your health, go to lumen.me/myworld to get 15% off your Lumen. That's lumen.me/myworld for 15% off of your purchase. And we thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring today's podcast.
Jeff, there's a lot to talk about when it comes to, this switch and this change from a weekly pay-per-view to a monthly pay-per-view. But, one of the things that's written about a lot that you start to see more and more in 04 is the difference of opinion with you and Dixie Carter. I mean, we even gave the example a minute ago about leaving Nashville, and you said, hey, that's just total BS. How would you characterize your relationship with Dixie Carter in 2004?
Not just good, I'll say really good. And here's where the family dynamic, as I look back, and again, Conrad, I've had a lot of time, I'll just say over the last 7 years, when you really try to analyze things and break things down and just kind of look back, and then obviously the podcast, kind of digging into it. When we fly out, we'll say, what was that, Labor Day weekend in 02? And now here we are roughly 2 years later. It was very apparent by this time to Dixie and the rest of the Carters that Jeff and Jarrett weren't on the same page. And at times they were way off on the same page. And so when you look at a father and son dynamic, Dixie, little by little in the different conversations, look, they're well aware of it. And I'm thinking to myself many a time, now this family is investing hundreds of, at this point, millions, and signed up for it and digging in. And now here we are again, writing another substantial check weekly for this TV. And just, they had dove in. By this time, me and my father had brought another investor to the table, and that went south. And my father I wasn't happy with it. My father was really unhappy with it. And he voiced it. And, this before they had bought him out, but we're not getting too far off from it. I think around this period. So the dynamic of Jeff and Jarrett not on the same page, I tried to handle with kid gloves with Dixie and her family, but our relationship at the time was good to really good.
Let's talk a little bit about Kid Cash. He's going to do an interview with bbrownvideo.com. It's a shoot interview that was done in May, and it's going to come to light here in August. And, well, here's the write-up from The Observer. He hinted about wrestlers trading sexual favors for pushes, saying, quote, all of a sudden there's a couple of guys that let guys blow them, and then they get title shots and they're making more money than you, end quote. He said he's working on getting a chiropractic degree, and he says TNA has a lot of young punks making lots of money who don't know how to get over. And as far as he was concerned, they're just working for their paycheck. He ripped on Bob Ryder for having decision-making power. He hinted that Ryder had put money into the company, but says that shouldn't give him a right to make booking decisions. He said he doesn't enjoy working for TNA, and specifically ripped on AJ Styles, Chris Harris, and James Storm. He said the first time he talked to Styles gave him a list of moves not to do because they were his moves. And Cash said Styles just copied them all from Nova in the first place. He said Chris Harris, if his match is cut, will screw up the time, go get his spots in, and claimed there was a spot with Quiet Storm and Harris where Storm wanted to do an elbow move, and Harris didn't want it in the match because of the size difference. And Storm did it anyway, and Harris knocked him out with it. Started calling Harris a tomcat. He put over Red and Trinity and said fair play was the biggest waste of money since Lex Luger. He laughed about Bagwell and Luger, saying they spent time laughing at the younger wrestlers and nobody wants to use them. Cash also said that he doesn't think TNA could succeed, even with television, because everyone in WWE laughs at TNA. Now, I just want to be clear. Kid Cash said all of this while he works for TNA. This isn't someplace he used to work. This is a company he still works for, and he's just letting it rip, Tater Chip. And that is the reason I love Kid Cash. He don't give a shit. But goodness gracious, when you read this, you have to be thinking to yourself, self, are we still paying this guy? What's happening? This is bizarre. Talk me through this, Jeff.
So when I read it in the research, I go, I do remember something vaguely about that. That again, Conrad, where are 20? Yeah, so that's what 20 years ago. X was not around. Instagram was not around. So for me to sit down at my laptop to read it, probably ain't gonna happen. And for whoever was around would have to call me over and say, hey, whether it's Bob or Jeremy or Rudy or whatever, they probably aren't going to say, I'm not going to spend my bandwidth calling Jeff over for him to read this because that ain't going to end well. So I wasn't aware of it at the time, but man, when I hear the recap of it or the verbatim of it to this day, it's going, oh, okay, that's haters are going to hate. He doesn't like AJ. He doesn't like Daniels. I mean, he doesn't like Harrison Storm. He doesn't like this. And, he kind of likes Trinity and kind of likes Amazing Red. He doesn't see them as a threat or whatever it was. Dutch Mantell always, he loved Cash, but would say, that son of a bitch is crazy. But that's why I like him. So Conrad, that's kind of the footnote on him. Super talented guy, but I don't remember this in great detail. I do remember many a time I would kind of tell guys, I don't think I ever had the conversation with Cash, that, hey, man, remember when they were just called shoot interviews? I said, do you know anything about leading the witness? I said, be careful. Guys are going to lead you down a path and kind of don't be surprised if they don't lie to you to kind of build up a story and then walk you into where you almost feel like you must respond. Heck, me and Dixie had those kind of conversations in early days about media training, and she wanted to work on AJ's accent. I'm like, you ain't getting the Georgia boy out of him. And that's all great for your effort. But I do think it's a pretty good idea for our talent to get media training to understand just the yin and the yang and what guys' jobs are. And so whoever this guy who did the interview, mission accomplished. I'm sure he got a lot of, I guess you would say, views or sales out of this shoot interview, regardless of how he got there and what he got Cash to say. But kind of, you're right. Let her rip tater chip was an understatement on those words.
There's a rumor that I guess he didn't feel like TNA was going to cover some medical bills for a broken fibula he suffered in the ring. TNA ultimately does cover that expense, and there's a report in the newsletters that says, hey, Kid Cash apparently has worked everything out with management, and he's in a much better mood. So I'm just trying to piece together, in retrospect, in hindsight, do you think he was pretty hot and bothered about maybe you guys were slow rolling him on a reimbursement or something for medical, and that's the reason he got out of pocket on the interview? Because that would make sense, I guess.
1 + 1 = 2. I mean, not even the logical. Knowing the history, yeah, it's pretty easy to connect those dots. I don't know for sure because he, like you said, Cash. Oh, David, he had no problem saying, well, it didn't matter to him at times. So, but on the flip side of that is that, yes. And I mean, I know Terry Taylor came to me one time and said, Jeff, I completely understand all sides, and we're not an endless pit, and we watch every, we watch all of our dollars close, but it's one thing to slow roll a vendor or this person getting paid, but these guys that have medical bills, can you help me get Panda to understand we need to get this out? I know they said they're good for it, but Panda, in their accounting, they had a system that they stuck by, and it was their ball of wax. And whether it was a personal injury or a vendor or a paycheck, they cut checks on their terms, not anybody else's. And I got it. I respected that as a business operator, that, okay, you have your system and it's your money. So he who has the money writes the rules.
Let's talk a little bit about David Sahadi. There's a report in the Observer that you should look for more profile pieces and personality pieces and just more packages with the addition of David Sahadi now that he's going to be on the team. And there's also a report that this is going to include upgraded equipment. When Sahadi comes in, does he say something like, "Hey, I'd love to be here, but I really need XYZ equipment wise"? Or did you know that and the timetable just lined up?
We knew it. I mean, we just so, when I think about this era and what we actually got done on the limited budgets that we were working with, and I'm not throwing shade at Panda. I've clearly stated this in this episode, but with the super limited funds that we were dealing with to create content, and I knew before anybody, and but our character development was at times really a challenge because of only so many minutes in a show, and what you can do in a 30, 60, 90, we'll call it a character development vignette package, it can go so much further if you've got the right people and the talent and it's shot right and edited right. We didn't have that piece of the puzzle until about this time, as we started getting into, hey, we need to create more character development, more packages. We got to sell this monthly pay-per-view. So that means we're going to need more hype. We're going to need to deliver round 1, round 2, sometimes round 3 to the pay-per-view providers. So it was, again, growing the business.
Something else I wanted to bring up. CZW is an independent promotion based out of Philadelphia, and they're going to do a pay-per-view. Now, it's not going to be a live pay-per-view, but they're going to have a recorded show that they tape for pay-per-view and then put on the different pay-per-view platforms. But TNA has a pretty strict rule that if you work for us, you can't appear on someone else's pay-per-view, which I get. But this is an independent, and it's taped. But still, guys like Alex Shelley and the Amazing Red and Sanjay Dutt, they would have normally been on this show, but they can't be on a taped pay-per-view. This feels, I mean, I understand the spirit of the rule, but it's not like anybody was not going to buy the TNA pay-per-view because they saw these guys on CZW, right? Is that just one of those deals where you have to draw a line somewhere?
When was Wrestling Society X?
That's a great question. I'll look that up.
But anyway, the reason I say it is there came a time, remember, we've kind of touched on the DirecTV conversations. And there came a time where I think In Demand was getting, hey,
07.
So it's a little bit later. Okay. Cause I remember that kind of came up for whatever reason. Maybe that was a Sprite conversation. But anyway, Conrad, there was a time that In Demand was broadening their channels and they were getting the best of Bloodiest Brawls. There were, oh gosh, what is the Puerto Rico Savoldi? There were different groups that were popping up, and I'm not saying CCW is part of it, but there were wrestling content being generated, being put on In Demand, Direct, and Dish, and sometimes it would be exclusive to In Demand or exclusive here, where they had come see these stars, and they would list 7 or 8 stars, and as a part of our discussions, and again, I'm going back to the Hardy, they wanted the exclusivity, or you could only see these stars on TNA. Again, you're dealing with, I'll call them network executives or pay-per-view executives coming off the era of of Attitude, if you will, of WCW, where Sting and NWO and whatever it is, and this made, those guys made their product different from WWF. So here's TNA, and we're out trying to get the very best deal. We're episodic. We're all this. Hey, you can't have guys that are appearing in the same week for 2 different companies. Now, me, JB, Bob Ryder, whoever else, we knew this ain't really going to hurt. But forward facing, we couldn't do it. So we tried to make it, don't miss your payday, Sanjay. Don't miss your payday, whoever the talent may be. But with that being said, we can't let you on the pay-per-view. And most guys didn't have a problem at all about it. They understood it.
Hey guys, if you haven't already, why haven't you tried Blue Chew? It's a unique online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Cialis and Viagra and Levitra, but all in chewable form and at a fraction of the cost. And it's super easy to get started. You sign up at bluechew.com, you consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you get your prescription within a few days. And the best part is it's all online. So you don't have to go to the doctor's office. It's no awkward or uncomfortable conversations. You don't even have to wait in line at the pharmacy. Blue Chew's tablets are made right here in America, and they prepare and ship directly to your door, all in a discreet package. And let me be clear, Blue Chew's not just for guys who have a problem. It's for guys who want to hit a few extra strokes, if you know what I mean. Blue Chew wants to help you have better sex. So discover your options at bluechew.com. Let's chew it and do it. We've got a special deal for our listeners. Try Blue Chew free when you use our promo code MyWorld at checkout. Just pay $5 shipping. That's bluechew.com. The promo code is MyWorld, and you'll receive your first month free. Visit bluechew.com for more details and important safety information. And we want to thank Blue Chew for sponsoring today's podcast.
Let's talk about the final Wednesday night weekly pay-per-view from Nashville. We're going to run through all the matches and the cards, and then we'll put a button on this week's episode. Mikey Batts is going to be with Jarrett Clark, and they win a 6-way X Division dominance match. It starts out as a tag team battle royal with Petey Williams and Johnny Devine, Batts and Clark, Shark Boy and D-Ray 3000, Frankie Kazarian and Michael Shane, Delirious and Sanjay Dutt, and Chris Sabin and the Amazing Red. A lot of folks here in the opener, and Mikey Batts and Jarrett Clark get the win. I think a lot of these guys, I'm still friends with Mikey on a bunch of different social media. He's doing well in life, but I really did think in that era, boy, Mikey Batts, Jarrett Clark, Michael Shane, these are some names that I thought, man, they're going to be big stars for TNA. They don't really have the staying power that I imagined at the time that they would. What can you tell us? We don't spend a lot of time talking about guys like Mikey Batts and Jarrett Clark. Mr. 630, I think he used to call himself.
Again, I hate to say the crop of guys, but we had so many guys by this time that were wanting to be a part of the product that were specifically X Division wrestlers. And I don't say it's formulaic because I didn't want to do it every week, but more often than not, it's an incredible way to start off an episode because Tenay and West had the opportunity basically to sell the action, but also to really promote and start telling stories of this is happening in the main event and this is happening in the semi-main event, and we're still going to hear this, but you can still get the emotion. And it's a way to really get the crowd, it's coming out hot. And so we did that more often than not. Jarrell, Mikey, that this match specifically had, we had some characters in there, old D-Ray and Shark Boy's a team, but Kazarian, those guys knew what to do. They went in there, tore the house down, told a story essentially by the end of the match on where we were going with something. But with Jarrell and Mikey and several others, by this point, we couldn't use them every week, but when they got their opportunity, they just tore the house down.
Next up, we got Eric Watts teaming with Sonny Siaki and Desire to beat Alex Shelley, Abyss, and Goldilocks. We would also see Scott D'Amore come out and cut a promo about Dusty Rhodes. And he's going to question how loyal Dusty Rhodes was to the NWA. He says that the first opportunity that Dusty got, he took the money, went up north, and danced around like a loser in polka dots. And Dave Meltzer says, well, D'Amore sure can cut a promo. We know that it's building towards a singles match later in the night with Dusty Rhodes and Scott D'Amore. I guess Dusty had been telling people, I'm the most over babyface in the whole organization. And they, of course, told the torch about that, and everybody got a chuckle. But I'm sure nobody had more fun with this than Scott D'Amore, a student of the game, lifelong wrestling fan. He's wrestling Dusty Rhodes on a pay-per-view. How thrilled was Scott, and how fun was this to watch?
You know, when I read the research, look, and obviously I was figuring out my match and a couple of hundred other things that day. But I remember kind of going into the creative. Look, Scott, yeah, maybe a bucket list item, but he knew how to, on paper. I'm sure folks, even to this day, what the hell were you thinking? You're going to put Dusty Rhodes against Scott D'Amore in a single? Yes, because it was entertaining and it obviously followed the X Division match. So a little gaga, a little entertainment. I don't even know if you have the times down there, but I'm going to guess it went less than 5, maybe 5. And it was, again, lots of storytelling, not a lot of action.
6 minutes and 40 seconds afterwards, Vince Russo's here. He takes his shirt off, gets in a shoving match with Scott D'Amore, and Dave would write, "It's almost worth seeing for the camp value." Let's talk about another match that happened that night. AJ Styles and Kid Cash in a best of 3 tables match. I wonder if AJ gave Kid Cash an updated list of moves he couldn't do before he beat his ass in 12 minutes and 43 seconds. Petey Williams is going to come out after and deliver the Canadian Destroyer. AJ is going to sell it like he's dead. It tickles me that we just saw Kid Cash talking trash about AJ Styles, and now he's got to put AJ over. But the Canadian Destroyer in 04, do you remember? I mean, now these days it's not special. I mean, you see it every time there's a wrestling ring, and everybody but Jeff Jarrett has taken it. But when you think about just the impact that move had in your lifetime, is that the hottest sort of holy shit move that you remember?
You know what? The first 3 or 4 or 5 times I remember thinking to myself, how can we protect it? And so
Yes.
it was a pretty well-known unwritten rule. Damn sure don't nobody do it, you know, but if I would have had time to decompress, and no, you just can't do it forever, because it was such a, how did they do that? And damn, that looks devastating. You know, all the things that, no matter what evolution or as professional wrestling, you know, the Tiger Mask, Dynamite Kid matches, or what, you just, okay, that's cool. That's next generation stuff. But in the early days of the Canadian Destroyer, that was always my mindset. How can we as a company protect that? Because Petey has lightning in a bottle, because when he would hit it, especially, you can go back and look at some tapes. We've done that in the studio in the past, put together the packages. I mean, when Petey would hit it in those early days, the roof came unglued. It was really special.
I don't know that we'll see another move like that, and I don't think Petey gets all the credit he deserves for that, because, and I know people get excited about Jerry Lawler's pile driver or Jake the Snake's DDT, and I mean, there's so many great moves that have credibility and blah blah blah. But as far as just a spectacle, I mean, I'll never forget the first time I saw it. And in this era, I was driving to Nashville to see these Wednesday pay-per-views, and it was always a thing where it's like, I hope he does it today.
Yeah.
I know that sounds silly, but it's like it became something that I want to go to this show and I want to see Petey Williams because I want to see the Canadian Destroyer. And with 24 ears, that sounds crazy. But the first time any of us saw it, it was like, what just happened?
Yep.
And can we see it again? I mean, it felt like something out of a video game. It didn't feel, you know, it's not wrestling. That was a spectacle. Do you think that move perhaps, because I know it had to inspire a whole generation of younger wrestlers, because so many do it today, but do you think Petey Williams maybe doesn't get the credit he deserves for being the tip of the spear of leading this whole new, because there's a lot of crazy spectacles, the Spanish Fly and all these other things that we see now, but I think Petey, man, he's got to be given credit for being a real innovator for something like that.
So as we're kind of sitting here talking, I remember when the stunner caught fire, if you will.
Yes.
Obviously it's not, you know, you don't have to be super athletic. And I know the DDT was we'll call it a generation before that. That, you know, when Lawler started pulling the strap down, and I'm getting too far back, but I think it would be an interesting roundtable conversation in that I'm not, no disrespect, but Petey wasn't this main event wrestler that his character development and his promos and his catchphrases and everything that went with it. And then boom, there's his finishing movie. No, he did an athletic move as one of 8-10 X Division guys at the time, or whatever it may be, that made him stand completely out on the athleticism of the move and the move alone. Is he the first? Look, because we've got, I mean, Steiner's, Jesus, I'm drawing a blank. His jump up, what's his move called? I want to say Steiner recliner, but that's not it. The athletic move when Scotty would jump up, go for the leapfrog, and flip backwards. Conrad, help me out.
Frankensteiner?
Jesus, yeah. That was an athletic move, but Scotty, big guy, and you kind of saw how he did it, and you were in awe that a guy 250 plus could do that. But is Petey one of the first guys from a strictly athletic execution part of a move that you go, I've never seen that. That's cool. I don't know. It's moonsaults, and Vader did his moonsaults, and Steiner and Frankensteiner, and I'm just trying to think of when moves just kind of jumped off the page at you. But the Canadian Destroyer, I don't know. It's got to be up there.
It's got to be up there. Let's talk about another tag match that happened on the very last Wednesday pay-per-view from Nashville. Chris Harris and Primetime are going to be Andy Douglas and Chase Stevens to win the NWA tag team titles. And then we would see in the main event, Jeff Jarrett get a win over Jeff Hardy to keep the NWA title. Not without a lot of gaga. We're going to get Rudy Charles getting knocked out, and Dusty Rhodes is going to come to ringside, and Russo's going to come out, and he's going to get involved. There's lots of pushing and shoving. Ultimately, Russo takes the bat from Jeff Hardy. Hardy misses a swanton, and you get the pin after a guitar shot. It's written in the Observer here. This was clearly booked to hide that Hardy isn't at this level, and they all knew it. Do you think that maybe his head wasn't all the way in the game, and you had to sort of fill in the gaps for him here, do some of the heavy lifting?
Can you Google TNA first monthly pay-per-view?
Mm-hmm.
And what was the main event?
I'm working on it.
Okay. I'm just, I want, because I want to make sure, because the month jive, but as I was, and I should have done this when I read the research the other day.
Victory Road, November 7th, Orlando, Florida. Jeff Jarrett versus Jeff Hardy in a ladder match for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship.
And that was what this was about, building toward that.
I got you.
Yeah. Because I remember saying, how do we kind of create a spectacle? I remember correctly, me and Dutch had a conversation. He said, "What, you know," I said, "Let me run something by you." I want to say Russo and me had a sidebar about this. I want to say that because by this point, what are we going to put on top on that first monthly pay-per-view? What's the biggest box office attraction? Okay, probably going to be Hardy in that role to win the title. How can we get there? And we created a lot of pomp and circumstance and episodic and drama and Russo and Dusty. We got a lot of people involved. We did the brawl, and this was and again, philosophically, people were saying, but Jeff, you're asking people to buy your weekly pay-per-view. Yes. And we were aware, A, we were going in a different direction than the monthlies. B, we were building toward the main event for the monthlies. And we could go down the reasons why we did and didn't do certain things. Jeff's headspace would have been way down at the bottom of that, just because how do we build toward this ladder match? And that's kind of the whole, if you back that out. Now, people that were reporting and criticizing and not very favorable, they didn't know we were going to a monthly build of a Jarrett versus Hardy ladder match. But that was what this was about.
Let's talk about, with the benefit of hindsight, that was the last weekly Wednesday pay-per-view. How do you feel 20 years later, 22 years later, about the weekly pay-per-view concept? Do you think something similar, like a subscription plan or something like that, could have worked? We know ultimately you tried this, you experienced some success. Maybe it never really quite reached expectations. I think, if anything, you and I have talked a lot about TNA and said, hey, you were just too early. The timing was off. But the wrestling business is changing. I mean, here we are just a couple of months away from WWE having their big show on a streaming service, which back then wasn't even a thing. So it'll continue to evolve. But I'm just curious, all these years later, what do you think of that weekly pay-per-view concept? And I guess if we go a little deeper, if you felt like you hadn't been blackballed by WWE and they were the only game in town, do you think you would have went for it after Bob Ryder first makes that suggestion on a fishing trip?
Well, hey, I never, and look, this is I never felt blackballed. Did I feel like I would have gotten paid what I felt my worth was? Zero chance. Like zero chance. It was Vince's market and Vince's market alone. He had no competition, talent after talent after talent. He had, I'll call it, his revenue for the most part in place. It was, from a promoter standpoint, not just me, who really had leverage at that point? Nobody. So I never really felt that never, I can honestly say it never entered into my mind. What I did want to do is, coming off the success, and I believe massive success, not that far in my rearview mirror of WCW, saying, okay, there is a huge void in the marketplace. How do we get there? How do we fill that? So what were my options? As I've stated over and over and over, there wasn't a TV station that would even take a phone call. Wrestling was truly a four-letter word, nowhere around pop culture, but they had run off more advertisers than they could attract. The networks were just not interested. And so to get in the game, what were our real options? Okay, yes, from the beginning, go do a time buy. What would that have really done? And boy, would that have been super expensive with no revenue coming in, because you're going to a TV network and saying, I'm going to buy TV. Even if we would have started off on the monthly pay-per-view, you would have really started as a deficit, if you will, in the hole that you got to, not on just to get to sea level, you got to go pay for 4 weeks of Vault TV. The model didn't feel sustainable to me to do that, to buy TV and then do once a month pay-per-view. And so what were my real options? Didn't really have a lot. And looking at the strategy, sustainable, and Richard Scrushy and Hell South and the funding, that let's dive in and give this thing a shot. And as time went on, look, Conrad, and we have talked about it, was it too early? I think the pay-per-view, the Apple Wallet generation was at least 15 years away. I even look, at how things have evolved. Gosh, Conrad, just really in the last, I'll call it since AEW started. When you kind of there, that's kind of a line in the sand. But if you go back a little before that, and Vince launching the network and how things were viewed there, and the success, or some people would try to argue and say lack of, and I'm saying, wait a minute, they may have projected this, but geez, 1.2 million people buying $10 a month for a catalog and this, and this. So I don't know. I look back on the weekly pay-per-views and say, did it bat 1,000? Not anywhere close. But look what Spike TV said to us the day we walked in. The confidence level they had in us, the talent that we had in us, the sizzle reel that we showed them, just A, B, C, D, E, F down the road. I've said it on here a couple of times. Flew up New York City, met with Spike, flew back home that day, stopped by the office to get my briefcase and a couple other belongings, walk in my office, check the voicemail, and one of my voicemails was Spike TV. We like what we heard earlier today. Let's talk about going to contract. So we can criticize and too soon, too late, all the different things. At the end of the day, it got us to where we needed to be. In a perfect position, probably not, but it was ultimately a successful plan.
Well, there's no doubt that it worked. I mean, TNA still exists to this day without Jeff Jarrett, without Dixie Carter. It's remarkable. And it was a major shift to see a company start with weekly pay-per-views, sunset that, get on television, go to monthly pay-per-views. And I'm glad we got to tell that story here today. We're going to be back next week talking all things Abyss. From his Joe Burrow love to his start in TNA to Dutch Mantel, the evolution of the monster, Goldilocks, James Mitchell, the comparisons he drew to Kane, the NWA Championship, and so much more. And Jeff, just real fast.
You got to be kidding me. Next week, you're talking Abyss.
If we can fit it in. It's all things Abyss next week here on My World.
Did I hear you say Joe Park? Are those segments?
We'll talk about it all.
The Slammiversary match is just one of my most favorite. Oh, boy. I'm going to bury him on fantasy football, his football picks.
Hey, just real quick, Jeff, who beats the Bengals?
Everybody beats the Bengals.
Everybody. Hey, we had a lot of fun. I hope you guys will tune in to AEW. I'm making plans. I got a little viewing party. I'm lining up down here. I'm going to get blown away in a hurricane, but I'm going to see you tan the hide of Hangman Adam Page. It's happening tomorrow night. It's Wednesday night. It's Grand Slam. It's Arthur Ashe. We've got a whole preview for you over at myworldpod.com. That's myworldpod.com. One of the things we talked about yesterday, Jeff, is this Vince McMahon documentary. Vince actually came out and issued a statement, and we talked about that in our episode last night. Dave Meltzer did Wrestling Observer Radio, and he said that he felt like that statement from Vince would actually backfire. It's going to draw more attention to the documentary. So perhaps it was a misstep by the chairman. He also revealed that last year, Vince tried to reach out to Netflix and buy the rights for this project. He wanted to shelve it, thinking if I own it, I can shelve it. Allegedly, he had Ari Emanuel try to do the same. Netflix and Bill Simmons refused. It's going to air tomorrow, all 6 episodes. And there's already a review out there, actually a few reviews that Dave Silva's going to show us here that have been recapped. Men's Journal says the Mr. McMahon documentary failed to show us the true Vince McMahon as promised, but that's mostly because the man himself isn't interested in showing it, despite all his whining that people don't really know him. Here's another one that we got from Paste Magazine, who says Mr. McMahon's Netflix new documentary series about Vince McMahon, who owned and oversaw WWE for 40 years, fails to fully contend with the man's sordid legacy. Here's another review from Slash Film. Vince McMahon Netflix docuseries Mr. McMahon is loaded with self-incriminating statements straight from the horse's mouth. I think there's one more here from the Daily Beast. Mr. McMahon is comprehensive portrait of the immensely successful and now disgraced WWE mogul whose vision was matched by his alleged misconduct. What do you make of these reviews that we're seeing? I mean, it
How do you
feels like. Go ahead.
go ahead? No, oh no, it feels like I thought you were going to finish. I didn't want to cut you off.
It feels like some of these folks reviewing it. I mean, I hate to say that this is the case because I'm not defending Vince McMahon here or any of the bad things that he's done in his career, any of those questionable decisions that he's made. But the doggone trailer for this thing did show a lot of Mr. McMahon, the television character. And I know that Mr. McMahon, the television character, is this evil, dastardly, no good son of a gun. But Mr. McMahon, I thought we were going to hear, and maybe we will, about the real life behind the scenes stuff. But even like in the trailer, we're seeing a lot of character work. And some of these reviews, it almost reads like maybe the reviewer doesn't know some of that's character work. I'm not defending Vince, but I don't know what to make of this documentary because I know Bill Simmons is a smart wrestling fan, but this kind of has me scratching my head. What say you, Jeff?
Conrad, you know I've got buddies, close buddies that live in India, live all over Europe, all over the United Kingdom. I got a buddy that I stay in at least once a week, contacting Australia. And over the last, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years, obviously in my sobriety, but hearing the narrative on their questions, and I'm a much better listener. I can't call myself a good one, but man, oh man, I am a much, much better listener and self-awareness, and try to get some of your traits where I just listen and silence is an answer and all those kind of things. But when I hear different folks make comments on the United States' political situation, and then they kind of dive into, well, what do you think? And I reserve the right that, hey, man, I don't get into politics. When you look at my history, my father's history, my grandmother's, we promoted wrestling in red and blue states, in red and blue counties, that some went way, way left and some went way, way right. So I don't and will never get into all that. But the reason I'm saying all that is that there are 3 sides to every story. There's in politics, the left, the right, and somewhere in the truth. And in this situation, I can't help but think, Vince put that statement out yesterday. I immediately go to Vince. Okay, he's playing chess. He's never played checkers in his life. What is this chess move about? Is he trying to get in front of it? I think you mentioned that on My World last night on the YouTube. Or is he being defensive, or is this a PR move? Did his PR company urge him to do this and he don't really give a shit? Or is this setting up something for 2025? Okay, then all of a sudden you've got the WWE executives, and then you got the Endeavor, and then the big swinging stick here is Netflix. And is Netflix trying to appease Bill Simmons or their audience or executives, or do they really want to do business with WWE? And that supersedes it. So who's pleasing who? We all know you can't serve 2 masters ever. I just don't know how all the cookie crumbles here. And with those reviews, which I think is a safe way to say they're kind of mixed, in that I think when we get done, when Netflix gets done with their 6, I think there is going to be a massive, massive opportunity to come up with a Vince McMahon produced doc of his life. I think there's going to be another producer want to jump on board. I think, oh boy, here come the floodgates, because it's going to get, my gut tells me, massive ratings. And so where does it all land, and where's all this going, Conrad? I don't have a freaking clue. I'm as confused, I don't say confused or perplexed, because I just believe all the people at the table, and I'm on a very, very small microcosm that people were bashing that main event, Jarrett versus Hardy, because it didn't do this and didn't do that. I would be pretty sure if they all knew, hey, Jeff Hardy and Jeff Jarrett are building to a ladder match at the first monthly pay-per-view. So this is why they're doing this and this. People would go, oh, okay, now that makes sense. So I think there's so many variables here that, Conrad, we don't have a clue, and they're all playing chess. So who is going to make the moves and who's going first? Connie, I don't know. But the fact that we're talking about it again at the end of the pod, and yes, it's a wrestling podcast, I just think it goes to show, and this morning and yesterday in the gym and today a little bit, those two guys, pretty heated argument about this documentary, and neither one of them have anything to do with the wrestling business. Kind of goes to show you that this content is compelling and will rate. I don't know, bud. What do you think, Connie? Give me your 90 seconds on it.
Man, I don't know what to think. I'm going to be watching it tomorrow, and Eric and I have agreed to break down each and every episode individually. So tomorrow at 5 o'clock, before the big show starts in Arthur Ashe, Eric and I are going to break down episode 1. I don't really know what to expect. I don't want to binge them all, but I know me. I'm going to binge them all. But we are going to talk about one episode per day. Oh, yeah, man. Like, I say that. Let me say, I mean, if I get going and I realize, because like I know, we've seen a bunch of mainstream wrestling documentaries that get it so freaking wrong that it's like, oh, I can't believe that the masses are now going to see this and believe that that's the truth. And if we're honest, a lot of that was content that was created by WWE that ain't close to the truth. I mean, there was a guy who said something regrettable about you once that became a meme. He's no longer with us now, but there's a large portion of the internet wrestling community who just parrots that nonsense, and it was totally off base and not real. And I'm concerned that we're going to get some of that even from mainstream now, because at least when WWE produces their content, their DVDs and things like that, it sort of exists in the WWE universe, but it's not really mainstream, so the rest of the world isn't seeing it. And that's my fear and concern, is that we're going to get a lot of misinformation and half-truths, and I don't think that that would be intentionally done. But you have to make decisions when you're going to be producing 200 hours of interviews. They have over 200 hours of interviews, and they're going to whittle it down to like 6 hours. So there's going to be a lot of stuff that can't get covered, that they just don't have the time for. And I think a lot of times the people who make those decisions, the editors and so forth, the people who understand story, maybe they understand story, but they don't really know the subject matter. And I think we're all going to poke holes in it. And an example of this recently is the whole Iron Claw movie. I and a lot of other wrestling fans, man, we could have picked out a dozen inaccuracies that totally changed that story. But if you weren't a diehard wrestling fan, you would think, man, that's a pretty good movie. A lot of us got hung up on, yeah, but there's a lot of misinformation in there. So I think we'll be talking about it. I know the world will be talking about it. We're going to touch on it next week. I'm gonna text Kieran when we hang up here and we finish today's episode, and I'm gonna say, will you just make this man sit still for 1 hour and watch episode 1? And we'll talk about it next week here on the program. If you're even able to lean up against that chair, I mean, are you concerned that you're going to be welted and bruised to hell and back after Arthur Ashe?
Buddy, I welcome it. I want to get, my eyes, it's almost healed, but last Thursday morning, Philadelphia, boarding, not before I boarded flight, going through TSA, Karen looked around, had that look on her face like, oh my God, your eye. Didn't even know. Had me a nice little shiner from the Hangman. So it wasn't the first time he's thrown some live wires, live rounds, if you will. He's aggressive, but I know I'm headed into a lumberjack strap match. My gut tells me Hangman's never been in one. And after tomorrow night, he will absolutely know that he's been in a lumberjack strap match. That's for sure.
No cinder blocks, no syringes, but a whole can of whoop ass and his receipt book. Don't miss Double J at Grand Slam. We'll be talking about it, the good, the bad, and the ugly next week right here on My World.
Peace.
have I told you what I'm helping people with in my real life? Yeah, I'm helping them save money over at savewithconrad.com. If you haven't already, what are you waiting for? Go get yourself a quick quote. Interest rates have improved and people are realizing, hey, now's a chance to save some cash. And I'm talking to you, if you're still on the fence about buying a house, we can get you out of that apartment, tell your landlord to kiss your grits, and get you into a brand new house. You can do that with 5% down, with 3.5% down. And yes, there are still no money down options available in 2024. SaveWithConrad.com is your first step. We're going to ask you, hey, where are you now and where would you like to be? And we're going to get you on a path to fit those short-term goals, but really meet the long-term goal that we all want. And that's to appreciate the American dream. The American dream isn't to give 29% of your gross monthly income every month until you die to some banker. No, you want to own that thing for real. Your own piece of land for you and your family, your legacy. And we want to help you get one for yourself at savewithconrad.com. You don't need perfect credit. You don't need money out of your pocket. And maybe you've already got a house, but it'd be nice if you could pay a little less. We're routinely finding a way to help our podcast listeners combine all of their debt, and I mean all of it. Credit cards, personal loans, even car payments. Get it into one low monthly payment. Not only is it a better interest rate, it's also a greater tax deduction, but maybe most importantly, a much cheaper payment. We're routinely helping our podcast listeners save $500, $600, $700, even $800 a month. But how much can you save? Find out right now at savewithconrad.com.
You guys, the housing market's really good right now, too, for you folks out there that are thinking of making a change in your overhead or your living conditions. Now's not a bad time to make that move. Nowhere better to do it than savewithconrad.com. He's going to save you money. He's going to be honest. And it's like dealing with a friend, an educated friend. And boy, there's a lot of uneducated and unfriendly people in that world. Conrad Thompson is not one of them.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, Jim. Check out our reviews online. You're going to see we've got more than 1,000 5-star reviews. Customer service is what it's all about. We want to be your mortgage advisor for life. So there's no application fee. There's no credit report fee. We just want to talk, man. Hey, tell us where you are and tell us where you want to be, and we'll try to help you get a plan to get there. We want to be your advocate, your humble advocate at savewithconrad.com.
Attaboy, Connie. Look at those cheeks, ladies. Look at those cheeks, ladies and gentlemen. My God.
How could you say no to that, right?
NMLS number 2129, Equal Housing Lender.
SaveWithConrad.com.